Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, everyone, no matter where you are in the world. My name is Mary Irvin. I'm the Education Officer at the International Testing Agency. Welcome to today's ITA Anti-Doping Education webinar. Our topic today is nutrition and dietary supplements. We are delighted to welcome a huge audience today. It's a record for us. The session is being streamed live on Facebook as we think we are pretty near capacity on Zoom with a lot of registrations. As such, I would urge any of you who are choosing to listen in English to maybe switch to our Facebook live stream. This will free up space for those listening via the simultaneous translation service we are providing, which is available in Zoom, but not in Facebook. The session is also being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in a few days. Thank you to those of you who tune in regularly, and a big welcome to anyone tuning in for the first time. It's great to see the interest in this important discussion. A big shout out in particular to World Skate, Karate, Muay Thai, Taekwondo, and the boxing communities for showing up in big numbers, and to all the dietitians and nutritionists joining us today. And hello to all the other sports, athletes, and those of you supporting your athletes all around the world. The ITA is proud to be recognised by UNESCO as a leading international organisation for the delivery of anti-doping programmes. And this educational webinar is delivered with the support of the UNESCO International Convention Against Doping in Sport. Before I go any further in my presentation, I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the simultaneous translation options we have available today. On your Zoom menu, you should see a button called Interpretation. The slides and our original audio today are in English, but you can also listen to simultaneous translation in Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish. And while everyone is settling into the rooms with simultaneous translation, feel free to use the chat function to tell us where you are from, what sport you represent, and what your role is. You can write in English or in one of the languages we have in translation today. Okay, so I think we're all set and everyone is on the right language channel, so let's get started. This is the fourth webinar of a year-long monthly series that are publicly available and designed to tackle key anti-doping topics and to raise clean sport awareness. Each month we will pick one topic, whether it's related to doping control, therapeutic use exemptions, the medical process, and we'll discuss the topic with an expert in their area and a high-performance athlete. As you all know, today's topic is nutrition and dietary supplements. I'm also very happy to introduce our official presenting partner for this webinar programme, Inform Sport. The support of Inform Sport means that we can continue to develop content for these webinars and have these meaningful discussions with the global sport community. Inform Sport has just launched their new app. You'll hear more about this and their supplement testing programme later today. So, on to today's topic, nutrition and dietary supplements. Today, in particular, we will examine how athletes can navigate between a food-first approach and dietary supplement options. We will talk about the importance of an individual approach to nutrition and the food-first approach. At the same time, we also acknowledge that many athletes do use supplements for health, recovery, training, and performance. However, no supplement use is 100% risk-free. So to help those athletes who do choose to use them, we will also look at the steps athletes and their support personnel can take to greatly reduce the risks. Helping us understand this complex topic are two experts from the field of athlete nutrition and supplement testing, respectively. We will also hear from a young athlete who will share their experience with contaminated supplements. I am confident you will find their presentations insightful and valuable, whether you are an athlete, coach, administrator, or anyone else working in sport. So I'm delighted to introduce you to today's three speakers in order of how we will hear from them. Our nutrition expert is Professor Ron Maughan from the University of St Andrews. He will discuss the importance of an individual approach to nutrition and tell us what the food first approach is. We will also examine what a supplement is and the risks associated taking with supplements. We are very excited to welcome him today. He's a world leader in his field. I'll just scratch the surface of his accomplishments in this introduction, and excuse me reading this, but I want to make sure that I get these exactly correct. He's the director of several IOC diploma programs in sports nutrition, sports medicine, and in sports physical therapies. He's the chair of the Nutrition Working Group of the IOC Medical and Scientific Commission, and organizer of the 2017 IOC Consensus Conference on Dietary Supplements in Elite Sport. And that is without even mentioning his extensive publishing history in science journals. Welcome, Professor Ron, and thank you so much for participating in this webinar. If you're there, Ron, and you can hear us.
Thank you for that welcome, and greetings to everyone from a cold and rainy Scotland.
Well, as a fellow Scot, I can say thankfully it's lovely and sunny here in Lausanne today. And we look forward to hearing more from you later on. Thank you. Also with us today is Abby Raymond, a 17-year-old international weightlifter from the USA. After speaking with Professor Ron, Abby will share her story with us. Before that, a little more about her. She's a 2-time youth national champion and has broken 16 youth American records. She has represented the USA in 4 international competitions and is aiming for the 2024 Paris Olympic Games. Abby, it's great to have you here. You're joining us bright and early from the USA. I think it's just after 7 a.m. with you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. I'm super excited to share some of my story with you.
Thanks, Abby. We'll hear more from you later as well. And finally, we'll hear from Terence O'Rorke, the Business Development Manager of Inform Sport. Terence will speak about the steps athletes and their support personnel can take to greatly reduce the risk of supplement contamination. A little bit more about Terence. Terence's main focus for the past 10 years has been supporting the global sports nutrition industry in providing cleaner, safer, and higher quality products to athletes and consumers. He also serves as a vice chair of the European Specialist Sports Nutrition Alliance. Prior to joining Inform Sport, Terence worked for the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, in Montreal. Hi, Terence, and welcome to today's session.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, everybody. Very much looking forward to discussing with you all things related to supplements and trying to provide some protection and guidance for athletes. So thank you.
Thank you to all three of our speakers. And so with the introductions done, let's get started. We're hoping to cover all of this in just over an hour so we can leave some time for your questions at the end. So let's welcome back Ron and dive straight into the world of nutrition. Welcome again, Ron. Maybe we could start with a fundamental question. Should athletes really be concerned with what they eat? And if so, how does diet influence performance?
Well, the slide you can see on the screen is taken from an IOC consensus conference we had about a decade ago, but it still holds good. And the conclusion of that group of experts was that diet significantly influences athletic performance. That's a very clear statement with no room for doubt. What you eat will affect how you perform. It went on to say an adequate diet in terms of quantity, so how much food, and quality, what kinds of food, before, during, and after training and competition will maximize performance. So the consensus of the experts is very clear. What you eat will affect how you perform.
Thank you for that. And moving on then, so we've heard you telling us about how diet influences performance. In your opinion, where does this fit in overall in making a great athlete?
Well, I'm going to contradict what I said a minute ago, because in terms of what makes a great athlete, nutrition is not one of the big things. The big things are things like talent, for which you can take no credit. It's something you inherited from your parents. We don't quite know what makes up athletic talent, but we all recognize a talented athlete when they see them. But in addition to talent, you need motivation. You need to be willing to do the training, the preparation that's necessary to maximize the use of your talent. You need to undertake the training consistently and intensively. You need this thing that we call trainability, the ability to respond to the training load with an improvement in performance. You need to stay healthy. You need to avoid injury. And those are probably the big things. But when you stand on the starting line of the Olympic Games and you look around, the other guys are all talented. They all want to win. They're highly motivated. They've done the training. They're fit and they're healthy. So you need something else to give you that little bit extra. And that's where nutrition comes in. And nutrition is one of the things that can make a difference between winning and losing. In the same way that nutrition is a small part of performance, the use of supplements is a small part of the athlete's nutrition strategy.
Thank you. So diet is extremely important, even as an overall small contribution. What difference then does targeted sports nutrition make?
Well, we need to think hard, and the athlete usually thinks hard about the training they're doing, and the training schedule is designed to produce the best possible result. And training's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But it doesn't make sense to train hard and ignore the benefits that come from making good nutrition choices. What we're trying to do with training is to produce changes in the muscle structure, in the cardiovascular system, and other tissues that will enhance our performance. The training provides a stimulus to those adaptations, but the nutrition, the nutrients we put into our bodies amplify those effects. So really, nutrition adds to our training. We can improve with training, but if we add nutrition, good nutrition on top, we'll get even better. And it says on the screen here very simply, a good diet won't make you into a world champion. You have to have the other things in place. But if you have the talent and you do the training and you make poor food choices, you won't be as good as you could have been.
Thank you. So if we think about nutrition, we often hear about a food first approach. Could you explain to everyone listening what that actually means?
Well, the food first approach means you need to think first about eating food before you start thinking about taking dietary supplements. And we often hear athletes saying, oh, I take a supplement just in case my diet isn't very good because I don't pay much attention to my diet. That doesn't make sense. Pay attention to your diet, because if you make good food choices, the diet will give you all the nutrients you need, and it should give them in adequate amounts. We can get all those nutrients if we eat a varied diet. And in some ways, nutrition is quite simple. We get carbohydrate, protein, vitamins, minerals, fiber, and water from the foods we eat. We don't need anything else. And the effect of training and competition is to increase the need for some nutrients. But if we're training hard, we need to eat more food to meet our energy requirements. That means we need to eat a lot of food. And if we eat a lot of food, and especially if we make good food choices, we'll get all the nutrients we need. And there have been some interesting surveys carried out in recent years showing that people who make good food choices are more likely than others to use dietary supplements, but they're also less likely to need them because they're getting the nutrients they need from the diet. People who use supplements often make poorer food choices.
Thank you for telling us about the food first approach. What do athletes also need to consider on an individual level? And why would this be different even within the same sport?
Well, every athlete knows they're different from their training partners, they're different from their competitors. They're individual, and they have individualized training schedules. Why would you have an individual training schedule and not think about your individual nutrition needs? You're different from everyone else. You need to meet your individual needs, and you need to think about what you're trying to achieve. So you need to think about your performance goals in the long term. In the short term, you need to think about the last training session you did, how you're going to recover from that, maximize the adaptation to that last training session. You need to think about the next training session and how you prepare for that. You need to think about developing an appropriate physique, getting the right amount of muscle, getting the right amount of body fat. A lot of it, as I said before, is about promoting adaptation to the training. What can I do to make myself better? How can I maximize the return for the training investment? And part of that is about recovery. Part of it is about staying healthy, preventing the illnesses that come from hard training if you don't have a good diet. And of course, you may need special strategies in preparation for competition.
Thank you for that. I think we can move on to the next slide, which is a summary one. Is there anything you'd like to add to that before we move on to the next question?
Well, I think the text here is quite clear. You need to individualize your nutrition. Just don't do what other athletes do, what you read about in the training books, what your coach might tell you, because coaches are usually very good at coaching and training strategies. They're often less good at nutrition strategies. So what an athlete needs depends on the sport and depends on the stage of development. It's not simple, it's complex. If you can, find someone who can help me, a professional who spent years studying nutrition and sport, who can give you individual advice.
I can see a couple of bullets here that talk about sports nutrition practice and sports nutrition professionals to give advice. What would form a nutrition assessment, and what type of questions should athletes be asking?
If you speak to a nutrition professional and ask for their advice, the first thing they'll do is to try to find out a little bit more about you and a little bit more about your current dietary habits. You don't just take an off-the-shelf diet and say, here's what you need to eat, starting with breakfast on Monday morning and going through the week. You need to say, what are you currently doing? Is your current practice good? Could it be better? If it could be better, what can we do to make it better? So usually we start off by saying, what are you currently eating? What are your dietary habits? What food groups do you eat? When do you eat in relation to training and competition? There may be a close evaluation of body composition. Is body fat at an appropriate level? Do we need to gain some muscle? Have you got healthy bones? We can do a biochemical assessment to look at nutrition status. Have you got an adequate level of vitamin C or whatever nutrient we're interested in? We can examine the athlete's well-being. How do you feel? How's your training going? How's your competition performance? And of course, on top of that, we have to look at other factors. Young athletes are different from adult athletes. Men and women have different nutrition needs. By and large, they're similar, but there are some differences. There are a range of differences depending on the stage of training, depending on the competition level. All of this requires some expertise. The athlete's busy with training, with competition, with sponsorship, and all the other things in the busy athlete's lifestyle. You need sometimes to step aside and get help from an outside professional.
Thank you for that. So we've looked at nutrition assessment, we've looked at the food first approach. Let's also take a look at the area of supplements, because we know that many athletes do take supplements. A study from 2020 suggests that 40 to 70% of athletes use them. Could you tell us, really, what is a supplement? Is it the vitamin C capsules that I have? Is it my sports gel? How can we define supplements?
It can be the vitamin C capsule, and it can be the sports gel, and it can also be an awful lot of other things. You see on the screen here a definition from the IOC consensus meeting on dietary supplements. It could be a food, or it could be an isolated food component or an isolated nutrient. And sometimes supplements are non-food components. But the key thing is that these are consumed in addition to the normal foods that you eat with a specific aim in mind. I am consuming this supplement to get a specific ingredient that will help me achieve a specific training or competition goal. They may be in the form of foods. A milkshake after training, for example, will provide protein and calcium and various other things. It's a food, but it's also a supplement.
Thank you. We mentioned earlier that there are risks in taking supplements, but that many athletes do choose to use them. Could you explain what some of those risks are?
There are risks in everything we eat. There are risks in the food we eat. And it's important not to look at supplements in isolation. Foods carry a range of contaminants. They carry a range of health risks if not consumed appropriately. Supplements are the same. There may be problems with taking supplements. Most of them you can consume safely without any adverse effects, but there are a number of recognized problems, and these problems can be very severe for the serious athlete. There are often issues with labeling of dietary supplements. Some contain low levels of the ingredients, and some contain higher levels than expected from the labeling. And this is a problem for the athlete. If you've done your homework and you've been speaking to a nutritionist and you're told you should take about 30 grams of protein after training to maximize the changes taking place in the muscle, you might be unsure whether your cheese sandwich is giving you 30 grams of protein. So you get a protein shake. Some of those protein shakes have been found not to contain the stated amount of protein on the label. So that's a problem. Sometimes supplements are contaminated with ingredients that are not stated on the label and are prohibited by the World Anti-Doping Code. So you look at the label, it says it contains vitamin C, you consume it, but unknown to you, there may be a prohibited substance in there, and that will cause you possibly to fail a doping test. There are also health risks with some supplements. They contain toxic substances. They contain extraneous ingredients that may be harmful to health. So a range of problems, not very different often from the problems with consuming normal foods, but amplified because this is something that the athlete assumes to be safe.
So how can an athlete and their support personnel do a risk-benefit analysis when they're thinking about the use of supplements?
Well, the first thing you have to do is to look at the potential benefit. Is there any reason why I should take this supplement? And just because your competitor's taking it, or just because your coach advises you to take it, isn't in itself necessarily a good reason. You need to have a positive reason for taking a supplement. And that's the starting point. If you don't need it, don't take it. The second point is to use doses that are safe and to use products that are recognized as being safe. And the third point is to use specific products that are low risk. And we'll hear more about this from Terence later. If you want to take a vitamin C tablet, for example, a product produced by a reputable pharmaceutical company is likely to be safer than that from a backstreet gym.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you're right, we'll hear more from Terence later on some of these areas. I wanted to move on now to the IOC consensus statement on supplements, please. You were the lead author on this. Can you tell us the consensus it reached, and in particular, what do athletes need to know from this?
We spent several days in Lausanne at the IOC debating the use of supplements in sport with a particular focus on elite sport. And in many ways, this was an important conference because we had representatives from many of the major sporting bodies, from FIFA, from FINA, from track and field, from a range of organizations. And up until the time of this conference, the general approach of most of the major sporting federations had been, don't take supplements, they don't work. Athletes should just avoid them. And that's been frustrating for nutritionists and dietitians because we know that's simply not true. There are some supplements that can help performance. And for the first time, the IOC consensus statement specifically recognized that some dietary supplements can be of particular benefit to athletes in some sports. Having said that, we also recognize the concern that many of the supplements are consumed by athletes who don't benefit from them, and that there may be some harmful consequences.
Thank you. And I think we have one more slide on the IOC consensus statement. We'll just pop that up for a minute so that the audience can read it. Is there anything additional there you'd like to add?
I think the only thing I'd add is that as part of that consensus, we did produce a couple of decision trees that would allow athletes and possibly also their support staff, including medical personnel and dietitians, to work through the steps in deciding whether or not to use a dietary supplement with the aim of improving the athlete's health, and secondly, with the aim of improving performance in competitive sports. So two different decision trees working through the steps that an athlete and their support staff might take in order to reach some conclusions.
Thank you. And then finally, I'd like us to look at the IOC expert group statement, please, on dietary supplements. Again, what should athletes really take away from this?
Well, for the first time, the statement included identification of some specific supplements that can help some athletes. Now, we need to be very careful because this is not suggesting that athletes in all sports, at all levels of competition, at all stages of their preparation, should use all or indeed any of these particular supplements. But it did say that there are some supplements for which there's good evidence of either health benefits or performance benefits. And those supplements include carbohydrate in the right type and the right amounts at the right time, protein, caffeine, creatine, specific buffering agents, including bicarbonate and nitrate. So that's quite a small group of supplements for which we felt the evidence was strong enough to identify them by name. But we also recognize that testing the efficacy of supplements is extremely difficult. And there may be small effects on performance that are not easily identified in the laboratory or indeed in field tests. Because just because the evidence doesn't show that something is beneficial doesn't mean that some athletes may not benefit from using that supplement. So there may be some others where the emerging evidence will suggest they may be beneficial, but athletes must be cautious. They must look closely at whether the risks are justified by the benefits.
Thank you for that, and for all the insightful answers you've given us during this presentation. It's been wonderful for us to hear from you, and we'll hear more in the Q&A a little bit later on. So as mentioned, if you do have any questions, please keep them coming in and we'll try and get through as many as possible at the end. It is a topic that we could talk about for a long time. And to help you learn more about this topic, we've put together some ideas and a list of resources that we hope you'll all find helpful. So what can you do? Firstly, we really encourage you to get informed and use reliable information sources. We'll provide some of these sources in the next few slides. For example, by reading more about nutrition, if you don't have access to certified nutritionists. And also importantly, if you do decide that the benefits of supplements outweigh the risks, choose products that have been tested. One way to get informed is to take a look at the videos from the IOC Diploma in Sports Nutrition that are freely available on YouTube. And you are correct in spotting a picture of Professor Ron on this slide. You can listen to Ron and his colleagues providing bite-sized answers to a whole host of sports nutrition questions. There are more than 200 one-minute videos to watch. It's well worth taking a look. Also freely available is a framework from the Australian Institute of Sport regarding supplements. You can take a look at their website and their ABCD classification system that ranks sports foods and supplements ingredients into groups according to scientific evidence and other practical considerations. Also, USADA's True Sport program has publications that you can download, including one on nutrition and one on supplements. I would also like to take this opportunity to ask any dietitians and nutritionists listening today to use the chat function or email us to let us know any other resources that are useful for high performance athletes. This would be particularly welcome for materials in languages other than English. And I mentioned to keep the questions coming in. I should also say as well that you can upvote for the questions you want addressed using the up arrow too, and we'll get through those towards the end of this session. But now it's time to turn to our next guest, weightlifting athlete, Abby Raymond. Welcome back, Abby.
Hi, it's really good to be here. I'm honored to have this opportunity and share some of my story.
Well, thank you again, especially for appearing so early your time. Maybe we can open up with a nutrition question or two maybe. Have you had breakfast yet? And what would breakfast normally involve for you?
I have had breakfast. Typically, a normal breakfast consists of coffee because everybody needs some coffee in the morning, and either some oatmeal or Greek yogurt and some fruit and maybe even some eggs. I try to get in all of the food groups, carbs, fats, and proteins. So it's a well-balanced meal.
Sounds delicious. Thank you for that and for coming on to share your story about your experience with contaminated supplements. So over to you, Abby.
All right. So thank you again to the International Testing Agency for inviting me on here today. As Mary said, my name is Abby Raymond. I am a 17-year-old Team USA weightlifter. I have been competing in the sport of weightlifting for about 6 years now. And the sport has taught me a lot about myself as an athlete and as a person. I became involved in weightlifting after competing as a youth gymnast, and I eventually found my way into CrossFit, which then introduced me to the sport of Olympic weightlifting, which I immediately fell in love with. And at a young age, I gained a pretty large amount of success relatively quickly. So that kept me motivated in the sport and kept me interested because I wanted to keep achieving my goals. So my story that I'm going to share with you today isn't uncommon or unfounded, but I hope that what I share with you helps you and your athletes make better decisions for yourself in the future. The most impactful year of my career to date was in 2018, where at 14 years old, family friends introduced my parents and I to a supplement company that they had just started. They assured us that their products were of high quality and that they were safe and clean and that they had complete control over the ingredients going into the products. As a young athlete eager to earn a sponsor, I jumped on the opportunity and accepted their deal to represent and use their products. My dad and I even explained to them that I was a randomly drug tested athlete by the US ITA, which is also known as USADA. So we told them that I had to be very careful with the products I used and consumed because I was a subject to anti-doping testing. They again assured us that their products were safe and clean and that I had nothing to worry about. So I started taking their protein powder and pre-workout. A few short weeks after accepting the sponsorship deal, USADA arrived at my house for the very first time, and it was a surprise visit. I had just gotten home from the gym, And I remember I was kind of nervous that they were there because they had to watch me pee in a cup and nobody wants that. But I was also pretty excited because the fact that they were there, it meant that they recognized that I was a legitimate and competitive athlete. So I was honored that they even wanted to test me in the first place. Prior to their visit, I had been made aware of my rights and responsibilities as an athlete because I had received anti-doping education. So I knew what to expect from the process. So after they did their thing, I went on and continued my training for a few more weeks because I was preparing for an upcoming competition. This competition was called the American Open, and I went there and I ended up performing very well. And I was super proud of myself because I had a really great performance and I was just on this high from doing really well and having a great meet. But that feeling of excitement was short-lived because the next day, the very next day after my fantastic performance, USADA called me and they notified me that my very first test, they found a microscopic amount of osterin, which is a prohibited substance. And I remember I was so confused, and there was just this wide range of emotions. It ranged from confusion to anger to sadness to denial. I kept asking the questions, how did this happen? Why did this happen? And I couldn't wrap my 14-year-old brain around what had just happened. And it turned out that the products I had just been given from my friends and this new sponsorship deal, the products weren't as safe as they claimed them to be. And after digging in a little bit further, me and my parents found out that during the manufacturing process, the products I had been using had become contaminated. So I unknowingly consumed a prohibited substance. And what started out as a really great moment of competing well, it turned into a complete nightmare. And I thought that my weightlifting career was over. But now, 3 years later, looking back at that whole experience, as crazy as it sounds, I can say with complete confidence that it truly was a blessing in disguise. What felt like a career-ending mistake turned into a huge range of positive opportunities, including my ability to take the lessons that I learned and turn them into learning moments for others to hopefully prevent them from making the same mistakes that I did. I now work alongside USADA as a voice for clean sport, and I work to create content that promotes what it means to be a clean sport athlete. I am also an athlete ambassador for True Sport, which is an organization empowered by USADA with the mission of providing resources to parents, athletes, and coaches, both on and off the field. And I am invited to share my story on both national and international platforms, just like this webinar. Ultimately, my nightmare experience has become the foundation for my clean sport platform. I am often asked what the biggest lessons I've learned from this experience are, and as there are many, the 3 big ones I hope that you take away with you today are that 1, adversity creates opportunity. We need adversity in our lives in order to learn and to grow. 2, dietary supplements should be used specifically as they are named, to supplement a food-first approach to eating. Taking supplements should not be a light consideration, especially if you are an athlete subject to anti-doping testing. So you should work with your nutritionist or your doctor to determine if supplementation is even necessary in the first place. And 3, should you choose to use dietary supplements, be sure that you dig deep into the history and the practices of the company you are selecting your products from. While assurances are nice to hear, knowing exactly what the company's intentions are and what they value, and also knowing if and which batches are third-party program tested such as NSF, Certified for Sport, or Informed Sport. Those are great ways to reduce your risk of consuming a contaminated supplement. Today, after lots and lots and lots of research and huge amounts of consideration, I have decided to partner with a company called Thorne. Thorne is a supplement company that has proven itself to be a trustworthy company and a company that offers over 30 NSF Certified for Sport products. One of the reasons why I feel confident after this experience using Thorne's products is because USADA currently recognizes NSF Certified for Sport as the program best suited for athletes to reduce their risk of consuming a contaminated supplement. The world of dietary supplements can be extremely complex, and it can be really overwhelming for athletes. And no one can tell you what the right decision is when it comes to taking supplements. That decision is ultimately up to you as the athlete, as is the responsibility that follows. So I hope after hearing my story, you will pause before the next time you reach for that protein powder or pre-workout and really dig deep and look into the company that you are selecting your products from. So thank you again to the International Testing Agency for inviting me on here today. I am honored to have this opportunity and to share this experience in hopes of helping others not make this same mistake.
Well, thank you, Abby, so much for sharing that powerful testimonial. It's hard to believe that you are still only 17 and you talk very maturely about what is clearly an extremely personal topic for you and a complex one. Thank you for your open approach and for allowing others to learn from your story. I've got a few questions for you, Abby. You went through lots of great advice there. How do you stay so strong? And if you could give one piece of advice to maybe the coaches and the parents listening, what would that be?
Personally, for me, my strength comes from Jesus. I am a Christian, and that faith defines who I am and how I live my life. So I remember when I first received that phone call from USADA, I was just filled with so much doubt, and I thought, what good could possibly come from this experience? But ultimately, I saw God move in my life so clearly, and he completely turned this situation around. What I thought was one of the biggest doors in my life closing turned out so many other doors of positive opportunities opening. So that faith has what kept me strong throughout this whole thing and is the reason why I'm able to share this experience with you all here today. And if I had to give one piece of advice to parents, athletes, coaches, anyone listening today, it would be to, when you do face adversity, keep pushing through, because I believe everything happens for a reason. And when you are facing something that's difficult, persevering through it, it will teach you so much about yourself as an athlete, as a person, your character, and I can assure you that you will come out of that experience in a so much better way. You will be stronger, you will have learned, you will have grown. So keep pushing through, because when we push through, that's when our character is formed. That determines who we are. So you've got this, keep going.
Thank you. And you mentioned some of the work that you do with True Sport. Can you tell us how you got involved? And I guess you must share your story on different webinars like this a lot.
So after about 3 or 4 months after I originally received the phone call from USADA, we were communicating, and it ended up turning out where they thought it would be a good idea to have me share what happened in hopes of preventing other athletes from making this mistake. So I worked alongside them to create an educational video, which in turn introduced me to True Sport, because True Sport is an organization that's empowered by USADA. So this is my second year of ambassadorship with them. And with True Sport, I work to promote positive values both on and off the field to different athletes. And I've had the opportunity throughout my 2 years of working with them to speak to different schools on their different values, such as perseverance, leadership, decision-making, goal setting, and just a bunch of other positive things. So it's really awesome getting to work with them because what they stand for as an organization is what I stand for in life. So our values, they tie in together, and I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to work alongside both USADA and True Sport in hopes of helping others in some way.
Thank you for that. And I can see you shared your social media data on the screen there. So any questions, you can direct them to us just now as well in the Q&A. We'll have time to hear from all three speakers at the end. But thank you again, Abby, for sharing your story. We're delighted that you could be here with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And with Abby's story in mind, let's move on to the third part of our webinar today and the third of today's presenters. Welcome back, Terence.
Thank you, Murray. Thank you, Abby. And it's good to be here.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, studies show that many athletes do choose to use supplements, and Inform Sport, through their global testing and certification process, help athletes manage the risks associated with supplement use. Terence is going to take us through how Inform Sport do this.
Thank you, Murray. Hello again, everybody. As Murray mentioned, I'm going to give an overview today of the Inform Sports program. I'm going to look at the risks that are associated with the use of supplements. I'm going to look at the due diligence that athletes should perform when they are deciding whether or not to take a supplement. And then I'm going to explain in detail what are the benefits of Informed Sport, how it protects athletes and how it allows them to conduct the maximum amount of due diligence and minimize risk. So if we go into a quick overview of what is Informed Sport. Very briefly, it is a global certification program. It was set up in 2008 with the support of various national anti-doping organizations. I believe there are also experts like Ron, who we heard from earlier, who also provided guidance to LGC when they set up the program. It is based on two fundamental pillars of quality assurance. The first one is a rigorous pre-registration assessment of the product and the manufacturing that goes on behind the product. Quite simply, a product will not get onto the program unless it is manufactured to high quality standards and uses ingredients that are from a reliable and clean source. And the second pillar is that we test every batch before it is released to market, so pre-release to market. This means that any batch that is manufactured of a certified product will have been through our laboratory, will have been tested for 280 banned substances, and only then, when the manufacturer or the brand receives the certificate saying it is negative, can that batch of product go out for sale. So it's extremely robust. We have approximately 1,200 certified products from 40 countries across the world. We very specifically made it a global program so that athletes, whether they are competing or training in different parts of the world, know that these products have gone through a rigorous risk minimization program, and that if they decide to use them, then they have been assessed to high standards. We all know that risks exist in the use of supplements, and as Ron explained and as Abby clearly gave her story, athletes have to make a decision as to whether they want to use supplements. Now, we do not get involved in the debate around the efficacy of a supplement, whether it works or not, whether it is suitable for a certain type of athlete. But what we do have is we have significant expertise in knowing the risks that are associated with it. And quite simply, there are three main risks associated with a supplement becoming contaminated. Excuse me. The first one is through the raw materials, so the ingredients that are used in a product. We know that the supplements industry is very innovative. It's all based on innovation and trying to find the latest, excuse me, the latest ingredient that is going to allow the brand to show that their product has benefits over their competitors. If a raw material is contaminated, this obviously introduces contamination at the very start of the manufacturing of that product. We also know that more and more brands these days are using botanical, or what we call plant-based ingredients. And these come in with inherent risks. There are certain plants and botanicals that contain naturally occurring prohibited substances. The second way that a product can become contaminated is through cross-contamination. And this is quite simply if the facility that is manufacturing the product is either handling banned substances or manufacturing medicinal or pharmaceutical grade goods, it is not difficult for those banned substances to get into the manufacturing of the supplement. They may use similar manufacturing machinery or similar lines. They may not have effective segregation processes in place. We test down for parts per billion, so it is very low levels of contamination, and this is to align with the testing that is conducted by the WADA labs for human urine and blood. When you are testing down to parts per billion, it does not take much for contamination or cross-contamination to occur. And then the third means of a product becoming contaminated is through adulteration. This is effectively intentional contamination, if you like. This is where manufacturers or brands are spiking their products with prohibited substances. This is to give a user of a certain type of supplement a very small benefit of whether using a stimulant or some other sort of enhancement. Now, we know that the market exists for these products. We know that there are people who want to use these products. They think it might benefit them. It might give them a certain encouragement to go to the gym or have a workout. And we know that their market exists because very often when brands who are spiking products are outed in the press or they're written about in the press, very often they see their sales go up. So it's very, very important that people are aware of these types of products. We also know risks exist because there have been numerous studies over the years into testing products, into testing certain types of products for contamination. The first of these was back in 2000, 2001. It was a major study conducted by the IOC and the Cologne lab, which is a WADA accredited lab in Germany. They looked at more than 600 products from 13 countries across a range of different matrices, whether it's gels or powders or bars. And they came back with the quite shocking results that 14.8% contained undeclared steroids. A few years later, LGC conducted a study in the USA. We looked at 58 supplements. And again, the results weren't very different from the IOC study. In the 2007 study, 25% contained prohibited steroids and 11% contained stimulants. The following year, a similar study was done in the United Kingdom, where we looked at 152 products. The results of that again came back, 10.5% of them contained steroids and or stimulants. And a few years later, a Europe-wide study was conducted on 114 products, and these were purchased online or from stores and across 12 different countries. Again, the results, 10% in this occasion contained steroids and or stimulants. And then the last research was conducted in 2016 in Australia. And this was specifically looking at high-risk products which possibly should not be on sale. We targeted 67 products and 19% came back containing substances banned in sport. And I believe from that survey, there was not only a risk to athletes in terms of doping control, there was also risk to health, in which case we had to tell the authorities on that. So it's very clear that there are risks associated with supplements. Banned substances are found in them, and particularly those substances or those supplements which are not part of a testing and certification program. There are also risks associated with supplements due to the size of the industry and the very innovative and powerful marketing that goes on behind some of the brands and some of the products. The supplements industry continues to grow at a steady level. It was valued at approximately $17 billion worldwide back in 2019, and they're forecasting by 2027 for it to be valued at 31 billion worldwide. So it's a big industry, and with big industries, there is often a very strong voice that is behind it. There's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of persuasion, and very often this voice can overshadow those of the nutritionists, the coaches, the anti-doping community, who are trying to provide a more balanced view with regards to use of supplements. The marketing machine is successful, it's entrepreneurial, it's innovative. And as you can see from some of the pictures here, there are some high profile athletes and celebrities that are used to endorse products. And we also know that many athletes, coaches and nutritionists do believe in the effects of supplementation. As Ron mentioned earlier on, there are some benefits to be had. And so what we've got to be very wary of is that there are certain people within sport and anti-doping who carry a very strong message saying, do not use supplements, they are not effective and they present a risk to your career and your health. And yet on the other hand, we have trained nutritionists and dietitians and performance directors and coaches who do see the benefits of it, as do the athletes. So there has been traditionally this mixed messaging, and it can be quite a complicated landscape for athletes. And so we have always encouraged that the sports and the anti-doping community tries to adopt a more harmonized approach with regards to the use of supplements. And this type of webinar that the ITA is hosting today is very important in trying to get that harmonized approach across. We also have to take into consideration that some of the sports and events organizers have perhaps warned athletes about using supplements, and yet they will then go ahead and have major commercial deals with supplements companies. Now that is a significant conflict, and it's a bit of mixed messaging which can certainly confuse athletes. So there's a lack of clarity, and as I mentioned, these types of webinars discussing the whole issue and providing education helps to reduce that lack of clarity. Now, we know supplements are a risk to athletes because of the very clear principle of strict liability that I'm sure most of the attendees today will be very aware of. But very simply, strict liability means that an athlete is responsible for what he or she puts in their body. It is quite a simple concept, but it is the concept on which the World Anti-Doping Code is created. So it's very important that if an athlete does decide to use a supplement, they are aware that they are responsible for it, and they must carry whatever the outcome of using that supplement is. But the good thing about the code, which as you all know is like the rule book for the anti-doping community and athletes across the world, is that there is some flexibility, and particularly in the last two versions of the code, so the 2015 and the 2021 versions. Under Article 10.6.1.2, it does identify and acknowledge that contaminated products, and in particular supplements products, can lead an athlete to committing a doping violation. And because of this risk, and because it exists, they allow athletes to try and minimize that's happening. There's a reduction of the period of ineligibility, and this is based on the principle of no significant fault or negligence. However, to be covered by this within the code, an athlete has to show that they have done their due diligence. And I'll just wait for the next slide to pop up so we can have a quick look at it. There we go. And so due diligence is all about an athlete showing the anti-doping community that they have made all the necessary checks as to whether the products they use, A, is effective, but B, also has been tested and contains the ingredients, etc., that it claims to have done. So a critical part of showing that you have done the due diligence is by only choosing products that have been on a certification and testing program. This is the only way that you will be able to get any assurance that A, the product is made to high standards, but B, that the ingredients in it are what they say they are, and C, that they have tested negative for any banned substances. So make sure that the batch that has been used, that you are using, has been tested beforehand, and you can cross-reference this on websites such as the Informed Sport one, which we'll show you in a little while. But also what's critical to due diligence also is to make sure that the batch you are using not only has been tested negative, but that there is a secure storage of that batch sample to be used for future testing. If indeed there was any problem with the product or the batch you're using, it is the athlete's responsibility to show the anti-doping tribunal that that batch they have used is contaminated. And the best way of doing that is by keeping a securely stored sample for future testing. Another critical part of due diligence is to keep a record of all the products you have used, and also, excuse me, take a record of all the batch numbers of those products. You can use this, or you can use screen grabs, you can take photographs, just so that you have all that information at hand. If at any stage you were to face a doping violation, you could show the authorities that you have done everything in your power to minimize the risk. And then finally, submit all of this information on your doping control form. As we can see highlighted at the bottom here, in section 4, there is an area specifically for this. It's for the medicines, and it's also for the use of supplements. In many respects, this is like an insurance policy for athletes. If you are using a supplement, be very transparent about it. Make sure that you have done your due diligence and that you can go back and have that batch tested again if need be. You know, hopefully that will never be the case, but you will have done your due diligence and you will be covered by the article within the code. So how does Informed Sport support this due diligence for elite athletes? It does it quite simply by minimizing the risk. And there are 2 steps in this. The first one is, as I mentioned earlier, a very robust certification process. We look at the quality systems and we review them in detail. We will look at the products and we will evaluate the ingredients. We will look at the raw materials. We will find out where they are sourced from, where the production and the packaging happens. We will make sure that the brand and the manufacturer have correct standard operating procedures in place, in guiding them on how they choose their suppliers. We will look at all of their SOPs, whether it's for cleaning, whether it's for segregation, whether it's for goods in, goods out. We will make sure that they are GMP verified. We will make sure that they have verification of their label and they can identify correctly the ingredients they are using. And as part of the certification process of Informed Sport, we also test the sample up to 5 times, including 3 from the very first commercial batch. This gives us a historic record and gives us confidence that there is nothing wrong, inherently wrong with that product. And then once it is certified, we will list it on the website to show athletes that the product has been certified. And the second part of Informed Sport is the post-certification process. And this again is extremely robust. We require certified brands to send 2 sealed samples of each batch. One we test for over 280 banned substances. The other sample we will keep in secure storage for the shelf life of that product. We will then, as I mentioned earlier, we will publish the brands, the products and product details and batch numbers onto the website, which will allow athletes to cross-reference and make sure that they do their due diligence. We also go one step further. We go out into the marketplace and we conduct what is called blind testing. So for every 4 batches of a product that a certified brand will have on the program, we will do 1 blind test. We go into the marketplace, we purchase the product without the involvement of the brand or the manufacturer, and we will test it for banned substances. And finally, we also conduct regular product reviews. We will communicate with the manufacturer to make sure there haven't been any changes in terms of the ingredients or the manufacturing process, just to make sure that that assurance is as high as we can possibly make it. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have a very good means of athletes being able to search for their brand, for their product type, or for their products or their batch numbers, etc. And we have done this through a newly launched Informed Sport website, and also very recently through our new app. And we're just going to take you quickly through a recorded means of how an athlete can do some due diligence. So we'll just wait for this little recording to start here. As you can see here, this is the Informed Sports website. You can go on, you can search by using, for example, a brand such as Maxi Muscle. This will then bring up the search results. So that's one way of searching, but we also have a menu on the left-hand side, or it gives you different types of functionality. So you can search by brand, you can look for category type, whether you're looking for amino acids or protein powders. You can search by how you want what you want the effect to be, the different types of formulation, where the product's available throughout the world. And as in the case here, this brings up all the different brands that have muscle within the search. And I think on this occasion, we're going to go to this product called Plant Max. This is what we call a product page. Each certified product will have a product page where we will have pictures of the certified products. And obviously, we will hopefully be able to show some of the information that is available on the labeling of the product, whether it's certain guidance in terms of the batch number or the ingredients or the ingredients panel. The more we can show, the better the information for the athletes to do their due diligence. Each product will have a certain amount of information, from its name, obviously, to the type of category, to the goal it has, to the formulation type. It'll give a very specific date as to when it was certified. And again, it'll give some information as to where it is available within the world. And it then has purchase links for those people who want to go on and actually purchase the product. But critically here, this is where the athlete must do their cross-referencing. So if they are looking at the products, perhaps they're holding it in their hands, they are checking that batch number against the batch numbers listed here on the left-hand side, they will then be given that assurance that the batch they are using has been tested and has been tested negatively. So that's a critical part of the Informed Sport program. It allows athletes to search for their products, and it then allows them to conduct as much due diligence as possible. One way of showing the robust nature of Informed Sport is a good way is by talking about what we do not permit. And there are certain things we will not allow our brands to state on their products. We won't allow them to say 100% banned substance free. We know, despite all the good work that goes behind testing and certification, there is always a slight chance of contamination. We won't allow them to say things such as WADA approved. There is no such thing as WADA approved in terms of supplements. We don't allow composite testing. This is where brands or manufacturers will say, can we send you in samples from 10 different products and you put them all together and just test that sample. We don't allow that because that dilutes the efficacy of our testing. Nor do we allow bulk testing. This is where a manufacturer may have a giant container and they will run different lines of products off that. Again, we require testing the very batch of that product in its finished form. We don't use listings such as all batches tested. I've no idea what that actually means. We don't allow skip lot testing. This is where some people say, oh, we'll just test every 10th batch, or we'll just test the batch that we want to give to an athlete. We require every batch to be tested, and this is the most secure way that we can in terms of providing risk minimization. And finally, there is full transparency behind the Informed Sport program. A consumer, an athlete, a manufacturer, a sports organization, an anti-doping organization will know exactly what goes into the certifying of that product and then what goes in for that product to remain compliant on the program. There is nothing to be hidden. It is fully transparent for everybody to review and thereby make a decision as to whether they wish to use the products. Another reason why we've been able to provide a lot of assurance to athletes over the years is because of the anti-doping expertise and the anti-doping heritage that LGC has. Informed Sport is part of an international life sciences company, LGC. We have offices in approximately 20 countries across the world. We have two laboratories that test supplements. One is in the UK, just outside Cambridge, and the other is in Lexington in the United States. We test for more than 280 banned substances using LCMS and GCMS. And very recently, we had a significant investment into high resolution, accurate mass technology, which is allowing us to increase our screen and monitor for even greater number of risks. And obviously, we test for the banned substances on the WADA prohibited list. But we have more than 55 years of anti-doping experience. I mean, this is quite a significant number of years when you consider WADA's only been going since 1999. We have been testing horse racing for the British Horse Racing Association, for the International Equine Federation, and other equine sports organisations across the world. Indeed, we were the official testing lab at London 2012 and Rio for equine sports at Olympic Games. We were a WADA lab between 2004 and 2007, but we handed back our accreditation to focus on the supplements testing. And as some of you may know, a laboratory is not allowed to, was not permitted to test humans and also to test supplements, because there is that inherent conflict of interest. And we've been testing supplements since 2007. We test approximately 25,000 samples a year. So if there's anybody in the world that knows about the risk of contamination with supplements, it is LGC and their Informed Sport program. Other types of drug testing, we also test for the British military. We do steroid testing and the like. So we have quite a unique range of drug testing services. I'd say there's no other lab in the world that has quite that sort of level of expertise. As I mentioned earlier, we have more than 1,200 products on the program now. We work with approximately 270 brands across the world in 36 countries. We definitely have a global footprint. And as I mentioned earlier, very much like WADA was introduced to try and harmonize anti-doping across the world, Informed Sport was developed for sport and sports supplements industry to try and create a harmonized approach to supplement certification and testing. We've managed to secure recognition and acknowledgement from quite a few organizations in the anti-doping community over the years, from the likes of NADO through to UCAD, who were very much part of helping us create the program back in 2008. We work with as many NADOs as possible, and part of our remit is to try and provide guidance and support for their athletes to try and avoid inadvertent doping. Likewise, with sports organizations, we regularly provide information for them to give to their athletes on how to make decisions on what products are safe in terms of contamination, and how they can conduct their due diligence. And finally, we also work with nutrition groups and trade organizations across the world, again, just providing them with some expertise and allowing them to try to then raise standards of manufacturing across the world. We've done a lot of work recently, or the last 5 or 6 years, with the European Specialist Sports Nutrition Alliance. They now have a very strict education program when it comes to contamination, and it's by working with the stakeholders in the industry that we can provide more and more guidance and support. So what are the takeaways from this Informed Sport presentation, but indeed I think from a lot of the earlier talk? It is very clear that athletes and sports use supplements, and there are some benefits to it. Again, we don't join that debate, but the reality is supplements are here to stay, and they are part of an elite athlete's daily routine. I think it's important to acknowledge that the supplements industry has made significant strides over the last 10 years in terms of improving quality and improving their manufacturing processes. I think that anti-doping and sports can play a significant role in trying to encourage that industry to do more in terms of the levels of assurance. They can do it by supporting programs such as Informed Sport. And what I'd really like to get across is that if sport and the anti-doping community can provide more guidance to their athletes in terms of how to safely use supplements, they will then hopefully reduce the number of inadvertent doping cases related to contamination. And if they can reduce those cases, that then frees up a significant amount of time and resource in terms of them being able to focus on, fighting the real cheats in the anti-doping world, those who are intentionally taking doping substances. And finally, the final takeaway is that Informed Sport was designed specifically to help elite athletes, to protect elite athletes, and by doing that, I think we've played a significant role in promoting clean sport over the last decade and into the future. So thank you very much for that, Murray. That is the end of the Informed Sport presentation.
Thank you so much for that, Terence. It's really informative and appreciate the time you've taken to be with us today. And so that concludes the more formal part of the webinar, but I can see that we have a lot of questions in the Q&A function. So could I please ask all of our speakers to put their cameras back on, and we'll take a look at some of the questions now. Okay, so the first one I can see is for Professor Ron. It's from Mona Lisa Sarma, and their question is, could you give your inputs regarding food nutrition and its effects on the mental health of athletes?
That's a difficult one to answer. It depends in part on exactly what you mean by mental health. I think one of the things about athletes is they often suffer from doubt, and they have uncertainties over whether the foods they're consuming are giving them all the nutrients, whether the supplements they're taking are contaminated, whether there are any issues that their competitors are taking advantage of. So education and information are absolutely crucial. And I think in that sense, nutrition education is vitally important in keeping athletes well informed about what they're doing. I think Abby's story tells us something about just how complicated a minefield this is for the athlete to wade through, bearing in mind all the other things the athlete has to be concerned about. And this is why it's sometimes important to pass the responsibility on to someone else, a physician or a nutritionist who has expertise in the field.
Thank you for that. The second question we have here, which has been upvoted 4 times, is from a boxer, I'm guessing. As I mentioned at the start, we have a lot of the boxing community joining us today. This question is from Mohammed Kazi, and I guess maybe this is another one for you, potentially, Ron. Their question is, wearing boxers' rubber clothing to lose weight, is it healthy? They'd really like us to try and answer this question because it's one of the problems that boxers face in the process of losing weight.
Not just boxers, in all weight category sports, this becomes an issue. And athletes often adopt unhealthy practices because they haven't prepared sufficiently well in advance and they're trying to achieve unrealistic goals. It can be extremely dangerous and extremely harmful. And I've certainly seen weight category athletes in severe difficulties because of attempts to lose unrealistic amounts of weight in a very short period of time. I think we have to work with the athletes to understand why they're doing this, to understand whether there's an alternative, whether we can help them achieve the target weight by adopting dietary strategies in a slightly longer term. If there's no alternative, we have to say, there may be situations in which it's just too dangerous and the athlete has to move to a higher weight category. It is dangerous.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the next question here, and I think this is probably something for both Terence and Ron. It's from a World Taekwondo member who's asking, so what kind of supplements do you want to suggest for athletes? Who'd like to go first there?
I'll just quickly go there, Murray. We don't recommend supplements for anybody. That's not our area of expertise. We leave that to the experts like Ron. We just test and certify them.
Okay, thank you, Terence.
And I certainly don't recommend supplements to anyone without knowing a lot more about that individual. What sort of athlete are they? What's their age? What's their training status? What are their performance goals? What's their current nutrition practice? And can we achieve their goals without using any supplements at all? So there's a lot of information we need to know before we start considering the use of dietary supplements. And in many cases, when we explore in detail, we'll find that supplements will not offer any performance or health benefit for the athlete concerned. So there's no simple answer, there's no short answer, it depends.
Thank you. Yes, I think through this whole presentation, we've all discovered that it's not a simple, straightforward question that can be answered very quickly. Let's try another one. This one is from Michelle Varokin, and again, I think probably both for Ron and Terence. Their question is, should supplement products carry a warning for athletes? You are strictly liable for an ADRV.
Shall I start that one, Ron? I think in an ideal world, that would be a nice thing, Michelle, but I think you'll find that supplements products are guided by food regulations across the world, and there are no regulations that focus on the risks associated with banned substances. So what we have done is create a program called Informed Sport. If the product carries the Informed Sport logo, that will provide the assurance that it has been tested and certified for substances banned in sport. I think the guidance and the risk associated with it should be coming through sport and anti-doping, because you know, the vast majority of people or consumers that use supplements are not elite athletes, and so they are not facing the same risks and the same issues associated with supplements.
I would just echo that response, Michelle, and I think you know very well that in the UK we have about 30 million people who use dietary supplements. We have a few thousand people who are liable to testing under the WADA regulations. It's difficult to convince anyone that we should label those products for the sake of a very small fraction of the consumer base.
Thank you both for that. And I see we're almost out of time. And I see we still have another 46 questions in the Q&A, which I'm guessing is a record for us. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get through them all. We've just put up a slide here. So if you would still like your question answered, please do get in touch with us at education@ita.sport. So that leaves me just a minute to wrap up today's webinar. A big thank you to Ron, Abby and Terence for their insightful presentations and for their expertise. And of course, a big thank you to you, the audience, for your active participation and tuning in such big numbers. After the webinar ends, you'll receive a link to our survey along with the presentation slides. We'd ask if you please take a few minutes just to complete the survey. It's not long, but it will also help us decide which topics to present to you in the future. Our next webinar will be Friday, May the 28th, same time, same place, and we will speak about the legal process, particularly what happens after a positive test. As usual, we'll open up registration on our social media channels a couple of weeks in advance. So as I said, please do stay in touch. You can either email us or stay in touch with us through our social media channels. Thank you all once again, and I wish you a great rest of the day or good evening.